Hello, this is fastmatt. Wanted to take some time today to go through a few troubleshooting techniques when you're working with these old Texas Instruments Speak Spells from the 80s. This is a unit here that I am planning to circuit bend, and it did have an issue that I did resolve just now, and I wanted to show the basics of how to go about figuring out what could be the issue if you have a situation where the Speak Spell just simply won't turn on. So the very first thing I check in that scenario is, are the batteries fresh? And if you do know that you have fresh batteries, are the connectors good? And what often happens is you can have a battery leak in the past and it could cause corrosion on these connectors or even the spring connectors here. I've seen the case where any of these parts could be corroded. And what I actually did to fix this is I cleaned up the contacts over here because they were very badly corroded or just had some surface rust. And they're not so bad that they're going to be replaced, but I was able to clean them up. And I'll show how to do that. But if you have a situation where you think the connector is just corroded and you need to clean it up, here's an example one that I've had in my parts bin, and you can see it's pretty nasty looking. What I do in that scenario is I hold the connector with a pair of pliers, and then I will just take a Dremel type rotary tool. I happen to have one like this. You can use a handheld Dremel, or in this case, I've got a kind of a cable-driven Dremel that I have a foot pedal actuator for, and just basically grind off the corrosion. And just keep working at it. You can see that it's getting better here, but just keep working on it until it's nice and clean and you see shiny metal. And then you know you're getting a good solid connection. And that's actually what the issue was for these two. I was able to correct that in these two. And then also, if the spring looks to be nasty looking, you can do the same technique. Just grab hold of the end of the spring and grind off the surface. Do that for both of them. Now to make sure you're getting a good connection. So once you think you have a good shiny connectors on all four ends here, you want to make sure the batteries go in the correct way, and you have a picture here that shows you the right way to do it, right? So pointy end down this way. And then the opposite is true for that one. All right. And if you try and still not getting power, what I would typically do next is grab a voltmeter. This one is pretty basic, but I have the voltmeter set to register in the 20 volt range, so that'll show you results for 20 volts or less. And what you should expect to see, if you were to take the red and touch it to the positive terminal on the battery, and then the black touch it to the negative terminal, you should see, about 6 volts, right? So these cells are 1.5 volts each. Anywhere between 5.5 and 6 volts is decent. If you still don't see anything registering, then I would again check those contacts and make sure your batteries are good. The next thing is to check, you can see where the battery contacts over here, you've got 2 of them, right? So there's a negative, which is the black, and there's the positive, which is the red. And you can see on the circuit board, the positive connects here, the negative connects to here. So I would take it one step further and check, okay, how's the voltage on those 2 areas? So again, we can see we get 6 volts here. If you're getting 6 volts at this point, then you know that there's no issue with your batteries or the connectors or the wiring to the circuit board for the batteries. So you've troubleshot that far. The next thing I like to do is, sometimes you could have an issue with the keyboard, the membrane keypad, which is built in. And if you have an issue with this, there's really not a whole lot you can do with this particular unit. What I would do to troubleshoot that is to, once you know that you have the 6 volts here, there's a certain point on the circuit board that you can short in order to cause the unit to turn on. So it's very similar to pushing the on button. So you go into here, and just take a screwdriver, and if I can give you a way to find this, you're going to have underneath this portion of the circuit board is a large chip, and I would find the 2 points furthest over here on this top corner. Like if you look to where this empty rectangle is here, I'd say the long row of pins that are just below that, and then the top 2 here. Touch those 2 together with a metal screwdriver, such as this one, and if everything works on the circuit board, you'll hear the sounder come on, and then you can see that it is turned on. So sometimes that will work. Pretty much always that will work. If everything else is good, but maybe the keyboard's not good, then that should turn it on. So again, to show you here, these 2 pins, turn it on there. And notice I'm keeping a hand on the batteries to make sure they stay in. And then you might try the other keyboard buttons and just see. I like to exercise every single button on the keypad. Because what will happen sometimes is you'll have some of the buttons will work and some won't. And again, if you have that scenario where some buttons work and some don't, it's pretty much a bad keyboard. You can't do much with it. You could probably circuit bend it, but you're not going to have all the functionality. But if your on button doesn't work, and this one, it actually does work. But if your on button does not work, then that could be a part of the keypad that's bad. Then the only thing that I would do in that case is I would find a donor unit that I could use a good keyboard on, and I could swap the board over to that one. But again, this is a really good way to tell, just touching these 2 pins together to make sure it turns on. All right, so that is another thing I would do is if you had a donor unit that had a good keyboard that you know about, you could basically do a brain transplant. You can take out the batteries, right, and then you take some type of pliers or screwdriver and just pull these contacts up. Just work the circuit board loose from where it sits. Sometimes you'll have those sticky, like a foam piece here, and I usually just take a screwdriver underneath that and sort of roll through it and just unstick that. That's really just there to keep it stable in the hands of your Gen X childhood, kind of keep everything where it needs to be. So like if you dropped it off the back of your BMX or something when you were a kid, it would hopefully stay put, but we don't need that as much now, so we will work that loose. And now you can see that the keyboard is now free. You've got the speaker still holding it in. You can take a pair of pliers, and there's going to be this one tab here that's holding that speaker in place. You can squeeze and pry that loose, and then your speaker is now free. So the only thing left that's holding it is this keyboard ribbon. And this is a trick in and of itself here. This is somewhat of a challenge to get back in. If you happen to pop this loose, there's some techniques I use to do that. I'll just go ahead and show you here. So pulling it straight out gently, you can see that it's now released from the connector. Some of these have a pretty stiff end here, and this one looks like it does, which makes it a whole lot easier. But some of them are really floppy here at the end, and it's a little more difficult to work with. But depending on how that is, you're essentially just trying to work the connector back, or the ribbon back into the connector. And I usually start from one end and work my way over, and just, again, make sure both ends are going in smoothly. If you have the really floppy kind that's really difficult to get in there, what I would typically do is take a screwdriver like this one, and you can work it into the end of it. I can't on this one because it's all taped together, but sometimes you might find you can get this in the folds of this, like in the V shape, and then just push it in, kind of start gently poking it into one side with the screwdriver. Again, I can't quite show you on this particular model, but I've got the benefit of having the newer kind, which is a little easier to deal with. So again, just work that in, and if you have the screwdriver, then you can get it started. Once you feel it kind of getting started and captured by the connector, then you just continue working down using thumb and forefinger to firmly grip the connector and work it in. Get the ribbon worked into the connector again. And once you have that, in theory, and say, for example, if you had to migrate this to a different keypad, it's the same technique. You're just moving it to the new body, plugging everything back in, getting your speaker back into place. Putting the circuit board where it belongs. And it usually just rests on these plastic posts here. All right, and connectors back in. And you're going to just use a pair of pliers to push those home. Put batteries back in. And if all goes well, I should be able to turn it right back on. One thing I didn't mention, sometimes you might have it to where it turns on, but you can't hear anything. So that could be like the speaker could be damaged. So if you have a similar small size speaker, or if you get one out of another unit, that's real easy to swap. You just unsolder the two connectors in here and solder in a new speaker. But that's something else to check if you have no sound. Check the speaker. And also, if you have no sound, it could also be this, the headphone input. And sometimes I've had to mess with this and troubleshoot and make sure the connections there are working. Sometimes you can even short those pins. If you think the connector is bad, you can often short out the pins and just make it work without that and just get some sound going to your speaker. All right, so those are some basic techniques. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments. I'll be happy to answer those. And again, thank you for your time, and hopefully this helps you resolve any issues with your Texas Instruments Speak and Spell, Speak and Read, or Speak and Math from the 80s. All right, talk to you soon.